They say family is forever. But what if the very people you trust the most are the ones who stab you in the back? On the night I thought love and loyalty would protect me, I discovered the cruelest truth of all. My husband and my own sister weren't just betraying me behind closed doors. They were building their perfect life on the ashes of mine. I was left humiliated, abandoned, and broken, treated like I didn't even matter. But what they never expected was that the same woman they cast aside would rise stronger, braver, and determined to make them pay for every tear, every sleepless night, and every cruel word. This isn't just a story of betrayal. It's a story of survival, strength, and ultimate revenge. And tonight, I'm finally telling it all. Broken Heart. My name is Claire. And today, I'm going to tell you how the people I love the most, my husband and my own stepsister, stabbed me in the back. But I'm not telling you this story to make you pity me. Well, I'm telling it because sometimes, the sweetest revenge doesn't come from shouting or crying or fighting. It comes from being patient, clever, and watching those who betrayed you destroy themselves. For 13 years, I thought my life was perfect. I married James when I was only 22. He was charming, ambitious, and so full of dreams. Together, we built our own small furniture store into something much bigger, a company people in our city respected. Everyone called us the perfect power couple. What they didn't know was that behind the smiling photos and the interviews, I was the one holding everything together. I worked long nights, handled the books, managed the employees, even designed new collections when our so-called creative director disappeared. James loved the spotlight and I let him have it. I didn't care whose name was on the billboard, as long as we were building our future together. Or at least that's what I thought. There was one person who never seemed to approve of me. My stepsister, Lily. She came into my life when I was 15 after my mom remarried. She was spoiled, selfish, and always needed to be the center of attention. If I got good grades, she had to get better ones. If I got a new dress, hers had to be twice as expensive. My mom used to say, "She's just insecure, Claire. Be patient with her." So I was. Even when Lily started working part-time in our company, I gave her the easiest jobs. I wanted her to feel included. I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd stop seeing me as her enemy and finally see me as a sister. But I should have known better. One evening on my 35th birthday, I dressed up, expecting James to take me out like he always did. Instead, he came home late, smelling like champagne, his shirt half untucked, with lipstick smudged on his collar. Froze. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice trembling. He didn't even look guilty. He just laughed. "Oh, don't start, Claire. It was just a celebration." Celebration? For what? He looked me right in the eye and said the words that made my whole world collapse. "For signing the company over. To Lily." I thought I misheard him. My heart started racing so fast I could barely breathe. "You what?" James shrugged, as if it was no big deal. "She's smarter than you think. Investors love her. She knows how to talk to people. It's time for the company to have a new face. Don't worry, you'll still get something. You can just relax now." Relax. After 13 years of pouring my soul, my sweat, my very identity into this company. I wanted to scream, to smash the glass in my hand, to fall on the floor and cry. But instead I felt something colder. A silence that spread through my body, wrapping around my chest like ice. I looked at him carefully, as if seeing him for the very first time. James, the man I trusted, the man I loved, had not only betrayed me, but chosen my own stepsister to replace me. And suddenly everything clicked. The late nights at business dinners. The way Lily had been showing up at the office more and more, smiling like she owned the place. The secretive glances between them when they thought I wasn't looking. It wasn't just business. It was personal. It was an affair. I remember whispering, "Both of you planned this, didn't you?" James didn't deny it. He just smirked. "You're good, Claire. But she's better. And I deserve better." That night, after he fell asleep beside me, I sat in the dark, staring at the ceiling. The shadows on the walls looked like prison bars. I felt trapped in my own life, a stranger in my own home. For the first time, I realized I wasn't living beside a partner. I was sleeping next to an enemy. The old Claire, the one who sacrificed, who forgave, who made excuses, she died that night. And in her place, a new Claire was born. One who wasn't going to scream, or beg, or cry. One who was going to make them regret ever thinking they could destroy me. But before I tell you how I got my revenge, you need to understand something. Betrayal doesn't break you in one single blow. Shatters you into a million pieces. And each piece holds a memory. I remembered staying up all night, balancing the books while James bragged at parties. I remembered lending Lily money when she blew through her allowance. I remembered designing our best-selling chair while James flirted with reporters, pretending the idea was his. Every memory was a knife. But instead of stabbing myself with them, I sharpened them, turned them into weapons. The very next morning I went to the office. When I walked in, people stared at me like I was already a ghost. They'd heard. They knew. My husband and my stepsister were now the official faces of the company. Lily strutted in wearing a red dress that clung to her like fire, smiling like a queen. "Oh, Claire," she said sweetly, "I hope you're not upset. This is for the best. You're just not cut out for this anymore." Not cut out. I built this empire. I smiled back at her, calm as ice. "You're right, Lily. Maybe I'm not cut out for playing dirty." Her smile faltered for a second, and in that moment I knew I still had power. Because the thing about people like James and Lily, they think betrayal makes them stronger, but really it just makes them careless. And I was about to use every ounce of their carelessness against them. When you've been betrayed, the first instinct is to scream, to throw things, to demand answers. But I learned quickly that explosions only feed the ego of the betrayer. James and Lily would have loved to see me lose control. They would have laughed, whispered to each other and told everyone, "See? She can't handle it." Oh, I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. The next morning I wore my calmest smile, poured myself a coffee, and walked into the office as if nothing had happened. People stared, whispering behind their hands. I knew what they were thinking. How can she show her face after this? But that was exactly why I showed it. Because step one of revenge is to let your enemies believe you're harmless. Lily was already sitting in the corner office that used to be mine. She had her heels kicked up on the desk, flipping through a glossy magazine instead of the company reports. She looked up when she saw me. "Oh, Claire, you're here. That's brave." Brave. She said it like I was a child showing up for school after a playground fight. "I came to work," I said simply. Her eyebrows lifted. "Work." James and I agreed. "You don't need to worry about that anymore." I smiled faintly. "I don't worry. Build. There's a difference." She blinked, confused, but I didn't give her time to respond. I walked right past her into the floor, greeting employees, asking about projects, making notes. To them it probably looked pathetic, like I couldn't accept reality. But to me it was reconnaissance. Every detail mattered now. Who respected Lily? Who secretly rolled their eyes? Which suppliers still called me directly instead of her? Which clients hesitated when her name came up? In betrayal, information is power. That evening I sat in my car with a notebook on my lap, jotting down everything I noticed. It wasn't much yet, but I knew one thing. Lily was careless. She wanted the spotlight, not the responsibility. And James wanted money fast. That combination would eventually destroy them. My only job was to be ready. 2 weeks passed. They hosted a big party in the company's name, showing off like they had already conquered the world. The venue sparkled with chandeliers and gold-trimmed invitations. James walked around shaking hands, bragging about our new era. Lily wore a dress so tight it looked like she could hardly breathe, basking in the attention like a queen on her throne. And me. I was there too. I showed up. In a simple black dress. Nothing flashy, nothing desperate. When people saw me, their eyes widened. Some whispered, "She's here." Others looked embarrassed, unsure whether to greet me. That was exactly what I wanted. My presence reminded everyone that I wasn't erased, that I still existed. And when James and Lily saw me, their smug smiles faltered for just a second. James leaned down and hissed in my ear, "Why are you here, Claire?" "Because this is still my company," I whispered back, smiling for the cameras. "And you'll never erase that." Later that night, as champagne glasses clinked and fake laughter echoed, I slipped out quietly. Not before noticing something important. Lily was already drunk, slurring her words, bragging about new investors. She mentioned names she shouldn't have, deals that weren't finalized. And I wasn't the only one who heard. 2 of our biggest clients exchanged worried looks. That was step 2 of revenge. Let them reveal their weaknesses while you stay silent. Behind the scenes, I started preparing. I hired a private attorney, not the kind that shows up in court, but the kind who digs, who reads contracts like a hawk and finds the smallest cracks. Together, we went through every document James had signed. And guess what? In his arrogance, James had overlooked something. Yes, he signed shares to Lily, but he hadn't dissolved my ownership. Legally, I still held 40%. That meant they couldn't make certain moves without my consent. When my lawyer told me this, I smiled for the first time in weeks. 40%. Not enough to control the company, but enough to block theirs. And so, while they paraded around calling themselves the new faces, I quietly became their shadow, blocking deals, delaying approvals, forcing them into bottlenecks they couldn't explain. But revenge isn't just about paperwork. It's about patience. I began rebuilding myself too. I started working out again, eating healthier, meditating in the mornings. Every time I looked in the mirror, I repeated one sentence. You are stronger than their betrayal. Because I knew, if I let their betrayal poison me, I'd already lost. One rainy afternoon, I walked into the office and overheard Lily yelling at an employee. Her voice was sharp, cruel. Do you even know how to spell a contract? Are you completely useless? The poor girl, barely 20, was trembling. I stepped forward and said gently, Why don't you take a break, Emily? I'll look at it. The girl hurried out, tears in her eyes. Lily turned on me, furious. Don't undermine me, Claire. I tilted my head. I don't need to. You're doing that yourself. Her face flushed red. She wanted to snap back, but the truth silenced her. Everyone around us had seen her cruelty. That was step 3. Let them destroy their own reputation while you quietly build trust. James was no better. He grew more reckless by the day. He leased expensive cars, bought a mansion in Lily's name, and took money from the company to fund his lifestyle. The employees noticed, the investors noticed, and I kept track of every single detail. I didn't confront him, not yet. Instead, I smiled at his arrogance, filing every piece of evidence away. Because revenge isn't about one dramatic moment, it's about the slow, steady drip of truth until the dam finally breaks. One night, as I drove home, I got a call from one of our long-term clients, Mr. Donovan. His voice was tight. Claire, I don't know what's going on over there, but I don't trust James and Lily. If you ever decide to branch out on your own, call me. I hung up the phone with tears in my eyes, not of sadness but of hope. They thought they had taken everything from me, but in reality people still saw me. They still respected me. And that respect would become the foundation of my comeback. That night, as I lay in bed, I whispered to myself, Patience, Claire. Their downfall is coming. All you have to do is wait, and strike when the moment is right. Because betrayal might have shattered me, but revenge was going to rebuild me. Stronger, martyr, unbreakable. There comes a moment in every storm when the clouds no longer hide the thunder. They announce it. For weeks, I had been gathering evidence, biding my time, wearing my calmest smile while the two people I loved most dug their own graves. But now, it was time to start pulling the rope tighter. I didn't march into the office and scream, I'm taking you down. That's what they expected. Instead, I did something far more terrifying. I smiled at them every morning. I offered polite greetings. I let them believe I had accepted my fate. Because nothing unsettles a guilty person more than silence. And my silence began to eat them alive. One afternoon I walked into a board meeting. Investors were gathered around, papers spread across the table, James at the head, Lily sitting smugly beside him. I sat down quietly, flipping through the documents. I noticed numbers that didn't add up, money that had vanished into expenses with no explanation. I already knew what those expenses were. The mansion, the cars, the jewelry. But instead of accusing him outright, I lifted my head and asked sweetly, James, could you explain this section to us? I must be missing something. His face paled. He stammered, tried to change the subject, but the investors were already leaning forward, eyes narrowing. James, one of them pressed, she's right. These figures don't make sense. Where did this money go? Lily shifted uncomfortably. James snapped. "It's under control. Don't question me." The room fell silent. And in that silence, the investors turned their eyes toward me. For the first time in weeks, I felt their faith returning. Not in James, not in Lily, but in me. That was the first crack in their empire. But cracks alone weren't enough. I needed a hammer. I reached out quietly to the employees who had been mistreated by Lily, the ones she had mocked and humiliated. One by one I listened to their stories. Emily, the young assistant she reduced to tears. Marcus, the designer she called unimaginative. Even Carl, who had worked with us for 10 years, and whom Lily dismissed like he was trash. I promised them something James and Lily never gave. Respect. And little by little, they began to trust me again. They shared emails, texts, and insider details about decisions James and Lily made behind closed doors. Every piece was another stone in the foundation of my revenge. But the most emotional blow came one night when I returned home and found an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a series of photographs. James and Lily, arm in arm, kissing outside a hotel. I had always suspected, but seeing it with my own eyes was like swallowing glass. My knees buckled. I slid to the floor, clutching the photos, tears spilling down my cheeks. It wasn't just betrayal of a wife. It wasn't just betrayal of a sister. It was betrayal of a human being who had given them everything. For hours, I cried silently into the night. My chest ached so deeply I thought my heart might give out. But then, something strange happened. As the tears dried, I felt lighter, stronger. Because the moment I held those pictures, I realized something. Their betrayal no longer had the power to define me. I wasn't the broken wife. I wasn't the forgotten sister. I was the storm they never saw coming. And those photographs, they weren't proof of my pain. They were proof of their downfall. The next day, I walked into the office with those photos tucked neatly into a folder. I didn't show them to anyone yet. No, I let the knowledge of what I held fuel my calm smile. Lily must have sensed something because she snapped at me in front of everyone. "Why do you keep coming here, Claire? You don't belong anymore. Can't you see that?" The room went still. Everyone stared. I looked at her, my voice steady but laced with steel. "Oh, Lily. You've taken my husband, my company, and tried to take my dignity. But do you know the one thing you'll never take?" Her lips parted nervously. "What?" "The truth. And the truth always wins." She laughed shakily, but her eyes flickered with fear. She didn't know what I meant, but she felt it. And that fear was enough for now. That evening, I arranged a quiet dinner with one of our biggest investors, Mr. Donovan, the same man who had called me weeks earlier. Over candlelight I laid everything out, the mismanaged funds, the reckless spending, the mistreatment of employees, and finally, the affair. When I slid the photographs across the table, his jaw tightened. "This is catastrophic," he muttered. "If this gets out, the company's reputation will be ruined." I leaned forward, my eyes burning with determination. "Not the company, just them. The company can survive with new leadership. With someone who actually cares." He studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Claire, you may be exactly what this company needs." Walking out of that restaurant, I felt a surge of power like I hadn't felt in years. For so long I had been the quiet one, the supportive one, the woman behind the curtain. But now I was stepping into the light. Not for attention, not for applause, but for justice. But revenge isn't just about winning. It's about healing the wounds they carved into your soul. One night, I visited my mother's grave. She had always told me to be patient with Lily, to give her kindness, to be the bigger person. As I stood there in the cool night air, tears running down my face, I whispered, "I tried, Mom. I really did. But she took everything from me. And I can't forgive her anymore." The wind rustled the leaves above me, and for the first time I felt my mother's blessing, not for forgiveness but for strength. I walked away from that grave determined to finish what I had started. The next morning I sent out anonymous tips to 2 journalists who specialized in corporate corruption. I gave them documents, financial inconsistencies, names of employees willing to talk. I didn't need to say who I was. The facts were enough. And when those articles hit the press, the explosion was louder than any scream I could have ever made. Headlines: CEO accused of misusing company funds. Rumors of scandal shake furniture empire. James and Lily scrambled, calling emergency meetings, yelling at PR teams, denying everything. But denial is weak when the truth is already spreading like fire. And as I watched them unravel, I didn't shout in triumph. I didn't dance in victory. I simply smiled, whispering to myself, this is only the beginning. Because their empire wasn't crumbling yet, but the foundation was cracking piece by piece. And soon the whole house of lies would collapse, burying them in the rubble they created. There comes a moment in every battle when silence is no longer enough. I had stayed quiet, gathering my strength, building my case, letting the truth spread like a whisper through the walls of the empire James and Lily thought they owned. But whispers weren't enough anymore. It was time to shout. It was time to burn their lies in the brightest fire. The company had called for an emergency shareholders meeting. The press was already circling like vultures, the headlines growing sharper by the hour. James stood at the podium, sweat glistening on his forehead, trying to deliver his speech. Everything you've heard is exaggerated, he declared, voice trembling despite his practiced confidence. Our finances are stable, our reputation is intact, and the rumors are nothing but jealous lies. I sat in the front row, my folder in hand. Every word he spoke was another layer of poison. When he finished, the room erupted with questions. Angry investors, nervous employees, distrust hung heavy in the air. And that's when I stood. Enough, I said softly. The room fell silent, every eye turned to me. I walked slowly to the stage, heels clicking against the marble floor, my heart pounding, but my voice steady. I was married to this man. I was his partner in building this company. And I was betrayed by not just him, but by the very person I called my sister. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Lily's face turned ghostly pale. James shifted uncomfortably, tugging at his collar. I placed the folder on the podium, opened it, and pulled out the documents one by one. Here are the financial records, I said firmly, lifting the first sheet. Funds siphoned from the company to pay for mansions, cars, and private luxuries. Money that belonged to you, the investors, the employees who worked day and night to make this company thrive. I held up the next paper. Here are the testimonies from employees mistreated, insulted, discarded without a second thought by Lily. And finally, I held up the photographs. My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. And here is proof of their affair. Proof that while I gave them loyalty, they gave me nothing but betrayal. A heavy silence consumed the room. James tried to grab the papers from my hand, but I pulled back sharply. You wanted to build an empire, James. But an empire built on lies can't stand forever. And today, it falls. The shareholders erupted. Shouts filled the room. This is outrageous. Is this true? We trusted you, James. Panic washed over his face. Lily grabbed his arm, whispering frantically, but her eyes darted like a trapped animal. The chairman stood. James, Lily, until further notice, you are suspended from all company activities pending investigation. My chest swelled with a mixture of grief and triumph. It wasn't joy. It wasn't happiness. It was something deeper. Relief. Justice. For the first time in years, the weight pressing down on me began to lift. But my revenge wasn't about destroying them publicly. That was just the consequence of their own choices. The real revenge was quieter. It was me, finally standing tall. That night I returned home, not to the cold mansion filled with lies, but to the small apartment I had chosen for myself. The air smelled of fresh paint and freedom. For the first time it was mine. I stood by the window, looking at the city lights. My reflection stared back at me, and for the first time in years I recognized her. Blair. Not the wife, not the sister, not the shadow. It was me. Days later, the headlines exploded. CEO James caught in scandal, shares plummet. Secret affair exposed. Family betrayal at the heart of billion-dollar empire. Former wife Claire steps forward as whistleblower. Strangers reached out. Women wrote to me saying, "Thank you. You gave me courage." Employees sent messages of support. "We always believed in you." But the most unexpected moment came when my phone buzzed late at night. It was Mr. Donovan, the investor I had met weeks ago. "Claire," he said, his voice calm but steady, "the board has been discussing new leadership. The company needs someone with integrity, someone with vision. We want you to take over." I froze, tears stinging my eyes. "Me? After everything?" "Especially after everything," he replied. "Because you proved you're stronger than them. And strength is exactly what this company needs." The day I walked back into that office, not as the betrayed wife but as the new CEO, was the day I realized my story wasn't about loss. It was about transformation. The employees greeted me with cautious smiles, hopeful eyes. They weren't looking at James anymore. They weren't afraid of Lily anymore. They were looking at me. I stood in front of them, my voice firm but filled with warmth. "We've been through chaos. We've been through lies. But today we begin again. Not with betrayal. Not with greed. But with honesty, respect, and unity." And in that moment I knew. This was the life I was meant to live. But the most emotional moment came not in that office, not in the press, but in the quiet of my own heart. Because one evening weeks later I received a letter. No name, just a few lines written in a trembling hand. "I was jealous of you all my life. I thought taking what you loved would make me feel powerful. But all I feel is empty. I've lost everything. I don't know who I am anymore. Lily." I stared at the words for a long time, tears filling my eyes. For so long I had hated her. For so long I had wanted her to suffer. And now she had. But instead of satisfaction I felt sorrow. Because revenge doesn't heal every wound. It only shows the depth of the scar. I whispered softly, "Goodbye, Lily. I hope one day you find peace. Because I already have." The night I closed that chapter of my life, I stood again at my mother's grave. This time I wasn't broken. I wasn't begging for strength. I laid a single white rose on the stone and whispered, "I made it, Mom. I survived. And I finally know who I am." The wind brushed against my face like her hand, warm and gentle. And for the first time I walked away without looking back. James and Lily faded into the background, stripped of power, stripped of wealth, stripped of the image they built on my pain. But me, I rose, not because I destroyed them, but because I finally chose myself. And that, in the end, was the greatest revenge of all.